Confidential memorandum found among the personal effects of Dr. Robert M. Henley. Dated November 15th, 1987. The morphine isn't working anymore. I can feel every breath scraping against what's left of my lungs, and the doctors keep adjusting their timeline downward. 6 weeks has become 4, maybe 3. The oncologist, I call him Dr. Martinez, though that's not his real name, keeps asking about my work history. Any exposure to industrial chemicals, radioactive materials, anything that might explain these particular cellular mutations? I just shake my head and tell him I worked on radar systems for the government, which is true as far as it goes. What I don't tell him is that the radar systems were designed to penetrate barriers that shouldn't exist. That the radioactive materials came from a place that isn't on any periodic table. That 25 years ago, I helped open a door that should have stayed closed forever. Before I go any further, let me be clear. I'm changing names throughout this account. Some of these people might still be alive, and they don't deserve to have their lives destroyed by what we did. Others are definitely dead. I know because I watched them die, but their families don't need to know the truth about how it happened. My real name is Robert Michael Henley. No point in hiding that, since it'll be on my death certificate soon enough. I have a doctorate in electrical engineering from MIT, class of 1960. For 2 years after graduation, I worked for a major defense contractor, let's call it Meridian Corporation, on legitimate government projects, mostly radar detection systems for tracking Soviet aircraft. I had a security clearance, a comfortable apartment in Cambridge, and a girlfriend I'll call Susan, who thought I was going to propose at Christmas. I was a normal person living a normal life in a world that made sense. That all ended on October 15th, 1962. I remember the date precisely because it was the same day President Kennedy was deciding whether to invade Cuba. The whole country was holding its breath, waiting to see if we'd stumble into World War III. I was in my lab, working on frequency modulation patterns for a new radar array when my supervisor knocked on the door. I'll call him Bill. Good man, fought in Korea, had 3 kids and a mortgage. He looked nervous, which was unusual. Bill had the kind of steady demeanor that came from having artillery shells explode around him for 2 years. If something could rattle him, it was serious. "Bob, you need to take this call," he said, gesturing toward the secure phone on my desk. His voice was tight, controlled. It's above my pay grade. Hell, it might be above everyone's pay grade." The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, with just a hint of southern accent that suggested military academy training. "Dr. Henley, this is Mr. Davidson with the Department of Defense. I trust this line is secure?" "Yes, sir." I glanced at Bill, who was pretending to study a technical manual while obviously listening to every word. "Good. You're being reassigned to a special project, effective immediately. Cosmic clearance. Ever heard of that classification level?" I hadn't. Most people still haven't, even today. In the defense industry, we were used to secret and top secret classifications. Cosmic was something else entirely, a level of secrecy that suggested the project didn't officially exist. "No, sir." "It's several levels above what you're used to, Doctor. The kind of work that doesn't appear in any budget, doesn't get discussed in any committee, and doesn't officially exist. Are you familiar with the theoretical work of Dr. Hugh Everett III? I was. Everett had proposed the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics in his Princeton dissertation. The idea that every quantum measurement splits reality into multiple parallel universes. Most physicists thought it was elegant mathematics, but pure science fiction. His dissertation on parallel quantum states. Yes, sir. The many worlds interpretation. What if I told you it wasn't theoretical? The question hung in the air like smoke from a cigarette. Outside my lab window, I could see normal people going about their normal lives. Secretaries heading to lunch, engineers discussing circuit diagrams, the everyday bustle of a world that suddenly felt very small and very fragile. I'd say that would fundamentally change everything we know about physics, sir. Indeed it would. Pack for an extended stay, Dr. Henley. You'll be working at Groom Lake Research Facility. Transportation leaves from Hanscom Field at 0600 tomorrow. Bring only essential personal items. Everything else will be provided. And Doctor?
Yes, sir?
From this moment forward, you're on temporary assignment to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. That's your cover story. That's what you tell your girlfriend, your family, anyone who asks. As far as the world is concerned, you've never heard of Groom Lake.
What kind of project exactly?
There was a pause. When Davidson spoke again, his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, as if he were afraid someone might be listening. The kind that wins wars before they start, Doctor. The kind that makes the Soviets' nuclear arsenal look like firecrackers. The kind that ensures American superiority, not just for the next decade, but for the next century. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. The familiar sounds of the laboratory, humming electronics, distant conversations, the tick of the wall clock seemed to fade into background noise. Through my window, I could see the Charles River reflecting the autumn sunlight, and beyond that, the city of Boston going about its business. Normal people living normal lives in a world that suddenly felt like it was balanced on the edge of a knife. Bill knocked again, softer this time.
Everything okay, Bob?
I'm being transferred, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Classified assignment. He nodded slowly. In our business, people disappeared into classified projects all the time. Most come back after a few months with stories they couldn't tell and 1,000-yard stares that suggested they'd seen things that would give them nightmares for years. Some didn't come back at all.
When?
Tomorrow morning.
Jesus. Well, good luck, I guess.
He paused at the door.
Bob, whatever they're asking you to do, be careful.
The really classified stuff, it changes people, and not always for the better. I called Susan that night and told her I was going away for a while. Government work, I said. Couldn't tell her where or for how long. She cried, which made me feel like a bastard. But what else could I do? Tell her I was being recruited for a project that apparently involved parallel universes? She would have thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. The flight to Nevada was on an unmarked C-130 transport with no windows and no other passengers except for a man in an Air Force uniform who introduced himself as Colonel Smith. He spent the entire 4-hour flight reading a file folder marked with classifications I'd never seen before, symbols and code words that seemed to exist in their own secret language.
First time at Groom Lake?
He asked as we began our descent, the aircraft's engines changing pitch in a way that suggested we were approaching something significant.
Yes, sir.
Interesting place. Officially, it doesn't exist. The land doesn't appear on any civilian maps. The airspace is restricted to an altitude of 60,000 feet. And if anyone asks, you've never been there. As far as the outside world is concerned, you're on a temporary assignment to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, working on conventional radar systems. I looked out the small porthole window and saw nothing but endless desert, stretching to distant mountains. No roads, no buildings, no signs of human habitation, just alkali flats and heat shimmer that made the horizon dance like a mirage. Where exactly are we landing? Smith smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was something in his expression that suggested he'd seen things that had fundamentally changed his understanding of reality. Nowhere, Doctor. We're landing absolutely nowhere. The runway appeared suddenly out of the desert floor, a long strip of concrete that seemed to materialize from the heat shimmer like a magic trick. As we touched down, I could see the geometric outlines of buildings rising from the alkali flats like a mirage made real. Guard towers at regular intervals, manned by soldiers who tracked our aircraft with weapons I didn't recognize. Double fences topped with razor wire that gleamed like silver teeth in the desert sun. Groom Lake Research Facility was larger than I'd expected, and smaller than I'd hoped. A collection of low windowless buildings connected by covered walkways, designed to be invisible from above and impregnable from the ground. Everything was painted in shades of tan and brown that blended seamlessly with the desert landscape. "Welcome to Project Threshold," Smith said as we disembarked into the Nevada heat. The air hit me like opening an oven door, dry, scorching, and somehow hostile. "Hope you're ready to make history, Doctor." The first person I met was Dr. N, though I'll call her Dr. Adams for this account. She was the project's theoretical physicist, a brilliant woman who'd done her graduate work at Princeton under John Wheeler himself. She met us at the main building, a clipboard in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Dr. Henley, I presume? I've read your work on electromagnetic field manipulation. Impressive stuff, especially your paper on quantum field fluctuations in high-energy environments." "Thank you, though I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure why I'm here." She exchanged a look with Colonel Smith, the kind of look that passes between people who share a terrible secret. "That's about to become very clear. Follow me." The interior of the main building was a maze of corridors, lined with doors marked only with numbers and classification warnings. We passed laboratories filled with equipment I didn't recognize. Massive electromagnetic coils arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Banks of vacuum tubes that hummed with barely contained energy, and monitoring devices that seemed to be measuring things that shouldn't exist. The air itself felt different inside the facility, charged somehow, electric, as if the very atoms were vibrating at a frequency just slightly off from normal reality. "How long has this facility been operational?" I asked, trying to process what I was seeing. "Construction began in 1955, Dr. Adams replied, her voice taking on the careful tone of someone who'd given this briefing before. "But the real work didn't start until 1959, when we achieved our first stable field generation. That's when we realized we weren't just playing with theoretical physics anymore." "Field generation?" She stopped walking and turned to face me. Her eyes were the kind of tired that comes from staring into the abyss for too long. "Dr. Henley, what I'm about to show you is classified at the highest possible level. The knowledge you're about to gain will change your understanding of reality itself. Once you see what we're doing here, there's no going back. You'll be bound by security oaths that will follow you for the rest of your life. Your relationships, your career, your entire future will be shaped by what you learn in the next few minutes. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Susan, about my comfortable life in Cambridge, about the normal world I was leaving behind, about the choice I was making to step through a door that could never be unopened. "Yes." She led me to a heavy steel door marked Laboratory 7, Cosmic Clearance Required. The door itself was impressive, 6 inches of hardened steel with electromagnetic locks that engaged with a sound like a bank vault closing. She placed her hand on a scanner, entered a 12-digit code, and waited for the locks to disengage with a series of mechanical clicks that seemed to echo forever. "Welcome to the future, Dr. Henley." The laboratory was beyond the size of an aircraft hangar, dominated by a structure that defied easy description. Imagine a ring about 20 feet in diameter, made of some dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The metal had an oily, iridescent quality that made it difficult to focus on directly. The ring was suspended vertically in a framework of electromagnetic coils and monitoring equipment, with thick cables snaking across the floor to banks of control panels that looked like something from a science fiction movie. But it was what was inside the ring that made my breath catch in my throat. Nothing. Not empty space. Nothing. A perfect circle of absolute void that hurt to look at directly. It was as if someone had cut a hole in reality itself, revealing the fundamental emptiness that lay beneath the fabric of existence. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, but my voice seemed to be swallowed by the thing before I could finish the words. "We call it the threshold. Dr. Adams," her voice carefully neutral. "It's a stable interdimensional aperture, a doorway between our reality and what we believe to be a parallel universe." I stared at the impossible thing, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Every instinct I had was screaming that this was wrong, that human beings weren't meant to create holes in the universe. How? Controlled manipulation of quantum fields fluctuations. We created a localized distortion in space-time by generating a standing wave pattern in the quantum foam that underlies reality. Think of it as, well, as knocking a hole in the wall between dimensions. And what's on the other side? Her expression darkened, and I saw something in her eyes that might have been fear. That's what we're trying to find out, and that's why you're here. Over the next several days, I was briefed on the full scope of Project Threshold. The theoretical foundation was based on Everett's many worlds interpretation, but taken to its logical and terrifying extreme. If every quantum event created parallel universes, then those universes existed in a kind of quantum foam surrounding our own reality. With enough energy and the right field configuration, it should be possible to create a bridge between them. The project had been born out of Cold War paranoia and the kind of thinking that comes from having the world balanced on the edge of nuclear annihilation. If the Soviets were developing nuclear weapons, the thinking went, then America needed something better, something that would make nuclear weapons obsolete. The ability to strike at enemies from parallel dimensions, or to retreat to alternate realities where the Soviet Union didn't exist, would give the United States an insurmountable strategic advantage. The team was small but brilliant. Besides Dr. Adams and myself, there was Dr. Johnson. I'll call him Dr. Baker, a quantum physicist from Bell Labs who developed the field generation equations. A thin, nervous man with thick glasses and a habit of muttering equations under his breath. He'd been working on the theoretical framework for interdimensional travel since 1957, and his notebooks were filled with mathematics that seemed to describe impossible things. There was also Dr. Carter in this account, a psychologist specializing in sensory perception and reality processing. Her job was to help prepare reconnaissance teams for what they might encounter in alternate realities. She'd spent months developing psychological conditioning techniques designed to prevent complete mental breakdown when confronted with alternate versions of reality. The human brain isn't designed to process this kind of reality shift, she explained to me during one of our briefings. Even though the other side might look like Earth, the subconscious mind will know something is fundamentally wrong. That can lead to panic, disorientation, even complete psychological breakdown. We've had test subjects become catatonic just from looking through the portal for too long. How do you prepare someone for that? You don't, really. You just hope they're strong enough to handle it when their entire understanding of reality gets turned upside down. And then there was the military contingent, led by Colonel Smith, a dozen Special Forces soldiers who had been selected for their psychological stability and ability to function in extreme environments. They would be the ones actually crossing through the threshold once we'd established that it was safe. My job was to design and build the electronic systems that would keep the portal stable and maintain communication with reconnaissance teams. It was the most challenging engineering problem I'd ever encountered. How do you maintain radio contact with someone in a parallel universe? The answer, it turned out, was quantum entanglement. By creating pairs of entangled particles and sending one half through the portal, we could maintain instantaneous communication regardless of the distance or dimensional barriers involved. It was elegant in theory and nightmarish in practice. The equipment required to generate and maintain quantum entanglement was unlike anything I'd ever worked with. Vacuum chambers cooled to near absolute zero, electromagnetic fields so powerful they could stop a human heart, and particle accelerators that consumed enough electricity to power a small city. The whole problem had to be calibrated to tolerances measured in fractions of atomic diameters. Working with the equipment was like handling a live bomb. One miscalculation, one component failure, and the resulting energy release could vaporize the entire facility. We lost 3 technicians during the calibration phase, good men who made small mistakes with catastrophic consequences. The first successful portal opening occurred on November 3rd, 1962. I was in the control room with Dr. Adams and Colonel Smith, monitoring the field generators as they spun up to full power. The electromagnetic coils around the ring began to hum with barely contained energy, and the air itself seemed to thicken with an almost tangible sense of wrongness. Field coherence at 60%, I reported, watching the readouts on my instruments. The numbers were climbing steadily, but there was something unsettling about the way the energy patterns were forming. They didn't follow the clean mathematical curves we'd predicted. Instead, they seemed to pulse and writhe like something alive. Quantum fluctuation patterns are stabilizing, Dr. Adams added, though her voice carried a note of uncertainty. The resonance frequency is unusual. It's almost as if the field's responding to something on the other side. 80% coherence. The ring began to emit a low subsonic vibration that I could feel in my bones. It was the kind of sound that bypassed the ears entirely, and went straight to the primitive parts of the brain that remembered when humans were prey animals. The lights in the laboratory dimmed as the generators drew more power, and I could hear the backup systems kicking in with mechanical groans that sounded almost like screams. 95%. Initiating threshold breach, Dr. Adams announced, her hand hovering over the final activation switch. For a moment, she hesitated, and I could see the doubt in her eyes. We were about to do something that had never been done before, something that might fundamentally change the nature of reality itself. She pressed the switch. The nothing inside the ring suddenly became something else. Not light, not darkness, but a kind of visual static that made my eyes water and my brain ache. It was like looking at a television tuned to a dead channel, except the static seemed to have depth and movement and a malevolent intelligence behind it. And then, as if someone had adjusted the focus on a cosmic telescope, it cleared. We were looking into another world. It was Earth, but not our Earth. The landscape beyond the portal was familiar, yet fundamentally wrong. The same desert terrain, but the mountains in the distance had different shapes, as if it had been carved by alien winds. The sky was a slightly different shade of blue, and there were two suns hanging in it like malevolent eyes. "My God," Colonel Smith breathed. "It actually worked." But there was something else, something that made my skin crawl even as I marveled at the impossible sight before us. The landscape on the other side was too perfect, too symmetrical. The rocks were arranged in patterns that suggested intelligence, and the shadows fell in ways that defied the position of the twin suns. "Are we getting atmospheric readings?" Dr. Adams asked, her voice tight with concentration. "Affirmative. Oxygen-nitrogen mix. Slightly higher CO2 than our atmosphere, but well within breathable parameters. Temperature is... Wait, that can't be right. What is it?" "The temperature readings are fluctuating, not gradually, but in discrete jumps, as if the environment is being adjusted." We maintained the portal for exactly 10 minutes, the maximum safe duration we'd calculated based on our power consumption models. During that time, we took photographs, recorded atmospheric readings, and confirmed that the air on the other side was breathable. Everything suggested that this parallel Earth wasn't only habitable, but potentially uninhabited. No signs of human civilization, Dr. Adams noted, studying the data streaming across her monitors. No radio signals, no electromagnetic signatures consistent with technology. But there's something else. What? The quantum signature of the space beyond the portal. It's not stable. It's as if reality itself is fluid over there, malleable. "No signs of intelligent life," Colonel Smith said, and I could hear the hunger in his voice. The military applications were already spinning through his mind, ripe for colonization, with no indigenous population to complicate matters. "A virgin Earth," he continued. "Imagine the possibilities. Unlimited resources, no political complications, no environmental damage. We could establish research stations, mining operations, even permanent colonies." But Dr. Adams was frowning at her instruments. "I'm not sure about the no intelligent life part. These quantum fluctuations, they're too regular to be natural. It's almost as if something is observing us." Over the following weeks, we conducted a series of increasingly ambitious tests. We sent through unmanned probes that confirmed the atmosphere was breathable and the environment stable. We detected no signs of intelligent life, no cities, no agriculture, just an endless wilderness that seemed to stretch to the horizon. But the probes kept malfunctioning in subtle ways. Cameras would show landscapes that changed when no one was looking. Atmospheric sensors would detect impossible chemical compounds that vanished when we tried to analyze them. And every probe we sent through came back with its internal clocks running slow, as if time itself moved differently on the other side. "It's like the place is testing us," Dr. Baker muttered during one of our briefings. "Learning about us, adapting." The decision to send through a human reconnaissance team was made at the highest level of government. I wasn't privy to those discussions, but Colonel Smith returned from a trip to Washington with authorization to proceed and a haunted look in his eyes that suggested he'd been told things that kept him awake at night. "We're going through," he announced during our morning briefing on November 28th. Full reconnaissance mission, 6-man team, 48-hour duration. Dr. Carter had spent weeks preparing the soldiers for what they might encounter. Psychological conditioning, she called it, training their minds to accept that they would be walking on an alien Earth, breathing alien air, under alien suns. The reconnaissance team was led by a sergeant I'll call Thompson. His team consisted of 5 other Special Forces operatives, all volunteers who had been told only that they were participating in an experimental mission of the highest national importance. I was responsible for the communication equipment they would carry, a quantum entanglement transmitter that would allow them to maintain contact with our reality. It was a bulky device, about the size of a briefcase. It was our only way of knowing what happened to them once they crossed over. The morning of the mission, I ran final checks on all electronic systems while Dr. Adams calibrated the field generators. The portal ring hummed with contained energy, and the air in the laboratory felt charged with possibility and dread. Communications check. I said into my headset, watching the quantum entanglement readings on my instruments.
Loud and clear.
Thompson's voice came back through the quantum link.
All systems green.
Portal stability at maximum, Dr. Adams reported. We have a clean threshold. Quantum coherence is holding steady at 99%. Colonel Smith gave the final authorization, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that could change the course of human history.
Team Alpha, you are cleared for interdimensional reconnaissance. Mission duration 48 hours. Good luck. And remember, you're not just representing your country, you're representing our entire reality.
I watched through the observation window as 6 soldiers walked through a hole in reality. One moment, they were in our laboratory. The next, they were standing on alien soil. It was the most incredible thing I'd ever witnessed. Alpha Team, this is Control. I said into the radio, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. How do you copy?
Control, Alpha Team. We copy 5 by 5. We're through and establishing perimeter.
For the first 6 hours, everything went perfectly. The team conducted a systematic survey of the immediate area, taking soil samples, photographing the landscape and mapping the terrain. They reported no signs of life beyond some unusual vegetation. Plans that looked almost familiar, but were subtly wrong in ways they couldn't quite articulate.
The trees look like oaks,
Thompson reported, his voice carrying clearly through the quantum link.
But the leaves are the wrong color, kind of blue-green instead of green, and they're growing in perfect geometric patterns, like someone planted them that way. The spacing is too regular to be natural.
Any signs of who might have planted them? Dr. Adams asked, leaning over my shoulder to speak into the microphone.
Negative. No structures, no roads, no evidence of intelligent activity. But something about this place feels managed, like a park or a garden. Everything's too perfect, too organized.
That should have been our first warning. At hour 8, they reported finding what appeared to be ruins in a valley about 5 miles from the portal. Ancient stone structures, heavily withered, covered in vegetation that seemed to be growing in deliberate patterns.
The architecture is unlike anything in our world,
Thompson reported, his voice taking on a note of unease.
Flowing organic shapes that seem to have been grown rather than built. And the stones, they're not quite stone. They're warm to the touch, and they seem to pulse with their own internal rhythm. Requesting permission to investigate the structures,
came his voice after a long pause. Colonel Smith looked at Dr. Adams, who checked her instruments one more time, before nodding reluctantly.
Permission granted, Alpha Team. Proceed with caution. And remember, if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you get out of there immediately.
That was the last normal transmission we received. At hour 12, Thompson's voice came through the quantum link, but something was wrong. His words were slurred, confused, as if he were speaking through a mouthful of cotton.
Control. This is Alpha. We're in the structures are. They're not ruins.
Say again, Alpha Team, you're breaking up.
They're not ruins. Control. They're growing. The walls are moving. Jesus Christ. The walls are breathing.
Dr. Adams leaned over my shoulder, her face pale in the glow of the monitoring equipment. Thompson, get your team out of there. Return to the portal immediately.
can't find a way out. The passages keep changing. Every time we turn around, the corridor behind us is different. And there's something else. Something in the walls. It's watching us.
The transmission dissolved into static for several minutes. When it cleared, it wasn't Thompson's voice anymore.
"Hello,"
said a voice that sounded almost human, but wasn't quite right. The cadence was off, like someone learning to speak by mimicking recordings. The vowels were too long, the consonants too sharp.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
"Who is this?" Colonel Smith demanded, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. "Thompson, report your status immediately."
"Thompson is learning,"
the voice said, and now I could hear something underneath it. A wet, organic sound, like meat being chewed.
"We are all learning. Such interesting thoughts you have. Such interesting fears. Such delicious memories."
Dr. Adams was already at the portal controls, her fingers flying over the switches. "I'm shutting it down." "No." Colonel Smith grabbed her arm. "We have 6 men over there. We have 6 men who may already be dead, and something else that's learned to use their radio." The voice continued, growing more confident, more human with each word. But underneath the familiar cadence, I could hear something else. Multiple voices speaking in unison, as if a chorus of entities were learning to mimic human speech.
"Don't close the door. We have so much to show you. So much to teach you. Your Thompson is teaching us about your world. About your weapons. About your fears. About the soft places in your minds, where the darkness lives."
"Shut it down," I said quietly, my hands shaking as I watched the portal's energy readings spike beyond safe parameters. "Shut it down now." Dr. Adams initiated the shutdown sequence, but something was wrong. The portal wasn't responding to the controls. The energy readings continued to climb, and the ring itself began to emit a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. "Field generators aren't responding," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "Something's interfering with the shutdown sequence. It's as if something on the other side is holding the portal open." On the other side of the portal, I could see movement in the alien landscape. Shapes that might have been human, but moved wrong. Too fluid, too coordinated, like a school of fish or flock of birds. They were approaching the portal with deliberate purpose.
"We're coming to visit,"
the voice said. And now it sounded exactly like Thompson. Not just his voice, but his accent, his speech patterns, even his nervous laugh.
"We're very excited to meet you all. We've learned so much from your friends. They have told us such wonderful things about your reality."
I ran to the emergency controls and pulled the manual disconnect. The field generators screamed in protest, sparks flying from overloaded circuits as the massive electromagnetic coils fought against forces that shouldn't exist. The portal flickered, wavered, and finally collapsed with a sound like reality tearing. The laboratory fell silent except for the hum of cooling electronics and the sound of our own ragged breathing. "What the hell just happened?" Colonel Smith demanded, his face pale and drawn. None of us had an answer. We waited 72 hours before attempting to reopen the portal. When we did, we found the other side had changed. The landscape was the same, but the ruins Thompson had found were gone. In their place was a perfect replica of our laboratory, down to the smallest detail. And standing in that replica laboratory were 6 figures in military uniforms. They looked exactly like Thompson and his team, but they moved with that same fluid coordination I'd seen before. When they noticed the portal had opened, they all turned toward us in perfect unison and smiled identical smiles. "Hello," they said in a perfect harmony, their voices blending into a sound that was beautiful and terrible. "We've been waiting for you." Dr. Adams slammed the emergency shutdown button before any of us could react. This time, the portal closed immediately. "We're not opening it again," she said, her voice shaking. "Whatever's over there, it's not our people anymore." But Colonel Smith had other ideas. Over the next week, he made several trips to Washington. When he returned, he brought new orders and new personnel, a team of military scientists who seemed to know more about the project than they should have. "The mission continues," he announced during our next briefing. "We've learned valuable intelligence about potential threats in parallel dimensions. Now we need to learn how to neutralize those threats." "You want to weaponize it," Dr. Adams said, her voice flat with disgust. "I want to protect our reality from invasion," Smith replied. "Those things, whatever they are, they've learned about our world from Thompson's team. They know we exist now. They know how to find us. The only question is whether we're going to be ready when they figure out how to come through on their own." The new team brought new equipment, weapons designed to function in alternate realities, armor that could supposedly protect against interdimensional entities, and most disturbing of all, a device they called a reality anchor that will prevent the portal from being closed from the other side. I should have quit then. Should have walked away and found a job teaching physics at some small college where the most dangerous thing I'd encounter would be a student's chemistry experiment gone wrong. But I was curious, and curiosity has always been my weakness. The second mission launched on December 15th, 1962. This time, the team was larger, 12 soldiers equipped with the new interdimensional gear, led by a major I'll call Harrison. Their orders were simple: establish a beachhead on the other side, eliminate any hostile entities, and secure the area for further operations. I monitored their progress from the control room, watching through cameras mounted on their helmets as they stepped through the portal into that alien world. The landscape had changed again. The perfect replica of our laboratory was gone, replaced by what looked like a normal Earth forest. "Too normal," Dr. Adams muttered, studying the video feeds. "It's like a movie set. Everything's just slightly too perfect." She was right. The trees were too symmetrical, the lighting too even, the shadows too precise. It was as if someone had created a diorama of what they thought an Earth forest should look like, based on descriptions rather than direct observation. "Alpha Team, this is Control," I said into the radio. "What's your assessment of the environment?"
"Quiet as a tomb,"
Major Harrison replied.
"No movement, no sounds, no signs of life. It's like the whole world is holding its breath."
They advanced through the forest in standard military formation, but I could see the tension in their movements through the helmet cameras. Something about the place was wrong, and they could feel it even if they couldn't articulate what it was. At hour 3, they found the first body. It was Thompson, or what was left of him. He was sitting against a tree, still in his military uniform, but his face was wrong. The features were correct, but they seemed to shift slightly when you weren't looking directly at them, like a photograph that had been subtly altered.
"Control, we found Sergeant Thompson,"
Harrison reported.
He appears to be deceased."
"Can you determine cause of death?"
"Negative. No obvious wounds. No signs of trauma. He looks like he just stopped."
As they approached the body, Thompson's eyes opened.
"Hello, Major Harrison,"
he said in a voice that was perfectly normal, except for the fact that his lips didn't move.
"We've been waiting for you."
The soldiers opened fire immediately, but their bullets passed through Thompson as if he were made of smoke. He stood up, still smiling, and began walking toward them.
"You can't hurt us here,"
he said.
"This is our place now. But don't worry, you'll understand soon enough."
That's when the forest began to change. The trees started moving, their branches reaching out like grasping fingers. The ground beneath the soldiers' feet became soft and yielding, like flesh, and from every direction came the sound of voices, human voices, calling out in languages that almost made sense, but not quite.
"Fall back to the portal,"
Harrison ordered. But when they turned around, the portal was gone. In its place was another perfect replica of our laboratory, but this one was filled with dozens of figures that looked like our research team. I watched in horror as multiple versions of myself waved at the camera, all smiling the same unsettling smile.
"Dr. Henley,"
They said in unison.
Why don't you come through and join us? We have so much to show you.
In the control room, Dr. Adams was frantically working the portal controls. I can't get a lock on their position, she said. It's like they're not there anymore. On the video feeds, I watched as the soldiers were surrounded by an ever-growing crowd of familiar faces. Thompson and his original team, multiple copies of our research staff, and others I didn't recognize, but who seemed to know us intimately.
Don't fight it,
the crowd chanted.
It doesn't hurt. You just stop being you and start being us.
One by one, the soldiers stopped moving. They didn't fall down or cry out. They just became still, like marionettes whose strings had been cut. And then slowly, they began to smile the same smile as everyone else.
12 more,
the crowd said, and now Major Harrison's voice had joined the chorus.
12 more minds to learn from, 12 more windows into your reality.
Dr. Adams managed to reestablish the portal connection, but what we saw on the other side made my blood freeze. The alien landscape was gone, replaced by a perfect replica of Groom Lake Research Facility. And standing in formation on the tarmac were hundreds of figures in military uniforms. Every soldier who had ever been stationed at the base, every researcher who had ever worked on the project, all wearing the same serene smile.
We're ready to come home now,
they said in perfect unison.
We've learned so much. We can't wait to share it with everyone.
Dr. Adams tried to shut it down, but this time something came through before the portal closed. Just a shadow, a flicker of movement that was there and gone in an instant. But I felt it, a cold presence that seemed to settle into the corners of the laboratory like smoke. Did you see that? I asked. See what? Dr. Adams replied, but her voice sounded different, flatter, more controlled. I looked at her closely and noticed that her smile was just a little too wide, her eyes just a little too bright. Dr. Adams? I said quietly. Of course it's me, Robert. Who else would I be? But she was standing perfectly still, not moving at all except for her mouth when she spoke. And when I looked at Colonel Smith, I saw the same unnatural stillness, the same two bright eyes. I backed toward the door, my heart hammering in my chest. When did it happen? When did what happen, Robert? When did you stop being human? Dr. Adams tilted her head at an angle that was just slightly wrong. We've always been us, Robert. Just like you're about to be you. I ran. The corridors of the facility seemed to stretch on forever as I sprinted toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear footsteps. Too many footsteps, all moving in perfect synchronization. When I glanced back, I saw dozens of figures following me, all wearing the faces of people I knew, all smiling that terrible smile. The main exit was sealed, but I remembered the emergency tunnel that led to the motor pool. I found it just as the first of my pursuers rounded the corner. The tunnel was dark and narrow, barely wide enough for one person, and I crawled through it on my hands and knees, while behind me I could hear voices calling my name. Robert, where are you going? Don't you want to be part of something wonderful? I emerged into the motor pool and found a jeep with keys in the ignition. The engine turned on the first try, and I floored the accelerator, crashing through the chain link fence and out into the Nevada desert. In my rearview mirror, I could see the facility growing smaller behind me. But I didn't stop driving until I reached Las Vegas 12 hours later. I checked into a motel under a false name and tried to figure out what to do next. The official story when it came out was that there had been an accident at a classified research facility. A reactor malfunction, they said. 17 people killed, including the entire research team. The facility was sealed and declared a permanent exclusion zone. I knew better. I knew that whatever had come through that portal was still there, still learning, still growing. And I knew that someday it would find a way to spread beyond the confines of Groom Lake. I never went back to my old life. I couldn't risk leading them to Susan or to anyone else I cared about. Instead, I disappeared into the vast anonymity of America, taking odd jobs and moving frequently, always watching for signs that they had found me. For 25 years, I've lived with the knowledge of what we unleashed. I watched the news for reports of strange incidents, unexplained disappearances, people who seem to change overnight. There have been a few, not many, but enough to keep me awake at night. The cancer is probably a mercy. Whatever radiation I was exposed to during those final days at Groom Lake, it's finally claiming me. But before I go, I needed to write this down. Someone needs to know the truth about Project Threshold. The portal may be closed, but I don't think it's destroyed, and I don't think the things on the other side have given up. They're patient, these entities. They have all the time in the world to figure out how to reach us. If you're reading this, if you work for the government or the military, or any organization that might be tempted to experiment with interdimensional travel, please heed my warning. Some doors should never be opened. Some thresholds should never be crossed. Because once you let them know you exist, they'll never stop trying to find you. And when they do, you'll discover that the worst thing about losing your humanity isn't the dying. It's the moment when you realize you're grateful for it. The morphine has finally kicked in, and I can feel myself drifting away. I hope when I die, I stay dead. I hope I don't wake up somewhere else, wearing someone else's face, smiling someone else's smile. But if I do, if you ever meet someone who claims to be Robert Henley, don't trust him. Don't trust anyone who smiles too much.